Okay, today's dose of heresy is market basket analysis, specifically with the Titanic classification dataset. Market basket analysis, or MBA, is most famously used in the grocery industry. And there is this urban legend that at one point in time, some grocery store chain used market basket analysis. They took a look at all their transactional data. And what they found was there was this relationship between beer and diapers. And the hypothesis was, the idea was that, hey, people who buy diapers need beer because babies apparently want you to drink, make you want to drink. Okay, like I said, it's an urban legend. But more specifically, MBA is a data analysis technique that mines through a set of data and tries to find interesting associations. And these associations can be interpreted as rules, hence the synonym for MBA, which is known as association rule mining. So here are some hypothetical examples that you could potentially mine from grocery store transactional data. For example, folks that buy soda and popcorn at the same time in their market basket are very likely to buy a salty snack. Also, not surprisingly, people that buy flour and buy baking powder at the same time are far more likely to buy sugar because they're baking something. And lastly, if you buy ham and processed cheese, you're likely to buy white bread. So association rule mining, MBA, market basket analysis, allows you to take a set of data, a set of transactions. So each row in your data set essentially is a transaction, and then a set of items, which will be the columns in your data set. And they're usually binary indicators, whether you have this thing or not. For example, if you buy soda, it doesn't actually say how much soda are you buying. It just says, are you buying soda, yes or no? And it mines this data set and it finds these interesting rules. Now, the thing to remember, as evidenced here, is there are things on the left-hand side. So for that first rule, the left-hand side is soda and popcorn. And on the right-hand side, and by the way, it's my left hand and my right hand, and on the right-hand side is a salty snack. Now, this is going to be important for what we're going to talk about here in a second. Okay, MBA is wildly useful. If you follow me, you know that I've talked about market basket analysis, association rule mining many, many times. It is a super useful technique. And in fact, I would argue that it's probably best to learn MBA before you move on to something like the random forest. And again, if you've been following me, you know how much I love the mighty random forest. So I must think an awful lot about market basket analysis to say, look, learn it before you study the mighty random forest. And here are the reasons why. One, MBA, market basket analysis, makes very, very few assumptions about your data. Unlike a technique like logistic regression or linear regression, which makes a lot of assumptions about your data, association rule mining makes very, very little assumptions about your data. Two, it makes use of binary features, which makes things extremely explainable. Like I said earlier, the example of the soda. It doesn't matter how much soda. It's just mining whether or not did you buy soda at the same time as you bought popcorn, regardless of quantity. That makes the modeling, it makes the insights, it makes the rules that come out of association rule mining much more interpretable because you don't have to think about in terms of like, well, do you have to buy X amount of soda before this rule applies? MBA distills this down to a very simple idea. Did you have soda? Yes or no? Did you have popcorn? Yes or no? If you have both of those things, you're highly likely to buy a salty snack. Makes it very explainable. And then lastly, and this is related to the second point, thirdly, is that the metrics in MBA, in association rule mining, are very, very intuitive, as we'll see here in a second. Okay, MBA and the Titanic data set. Okay, you can use MBA in many, many, many scenarios, and it's an extremely useful data exploratory tool. Anytime that you can model a characteristic, say a customer characteristic or behavior, like a customer behavior, as a binary variable, as a yes or no indicator, then it's possible that MBA might be useful to you as part of your data exploratory process. For example, you can take the Kaggle Titanic dataset, which is exactly what I did for this video, and you can engineer some binary features. So for example, you can engineer a binary feature that says, are you in first class versus second class versus third class? You can also engineer a feature to say, look, are you a child versus an adult versus elderly? And lastly is another example of a binary feature you can engineer. You can engineer whether or not there is a child or an elderly person or both traveling as part of the same group of passengers. So this gives you some sort of hint of what's possible. You can engineer just a ton of binary indicators just from the Titanic data set. And the Titanic data set doesn't have that many features to begin with. So it gives you some idea of the power here that you have at your disposal. So now what you can do is you can pin that right-hand side. So in the case of Titanic, what you would do is you would say, look, every passenger observation in the Titanic data set is a transaction. And then every column in that data set is an item in the market basket. And then what you do is you pin the survival item to the right-hand side. And then you say, hey, what are all the rules on the left-hand side that are highly associated with survival? Right? Because in the Titanic data set, survival is a 1 if you survive or 0 if you don't. Essentially, it's a binary indicator. Okay, great. So then what you do is you just say, okay, fine. Once you've set up these features and you just point the association rule mining algorithm at it and you just let the goodness ensue. Okay, so this is exactly what I did. I took the Titanic data set from the Kaggle competition website, just the training data. I engineered a bunch of different types of binary features into it, and then I ran association rule mining on it. Locking survived as the right-hand side, as you can see here. As you can see here in all of these rules, right? A whole bunch of rules. Now, for example, take a look at this first one here. The most powerful rule was first class, so the passengers in first class, they are female and they are an adult, okay? This is awesome, right? This is the most powerful rule that we have here. And then we can see here that there are different types of variations. Some of them are conceptually duplicate. Like for example, right here you see a rule that says, are you a child? Yes or no. And then there's also this other rule that says, are you a child and has child? What this says is, if you're a child and you're traveling in a group with children, this rule applies. Well, of course, if you're a child, it's extremely unlikely that you were traveling on the Titanic by yourself. So yeah, most likely you're part of a group. So there is some conceptual redundancy in the rules. However, check out how useful this is, how intuitive and how powerful it is. So first up, let's take a look at the support column. Okay, support is wildly easy. It says, look, out of all of your transactions, out of all the rows in your data set, what percentage of the rows exhibited this rule? So for example, in the most powerful rule that we have, about 7.6% of the records fit this rule of first class, female, and adult. So that's not too bad, right? 7.6%. That's like what, 1 out of 11, 1 out of 12-ish? Probably about 1 out of 12-ish records. Not bad. Next up is confidence. That tells you when the rule is exhibited, right? When the rule exists, in this case, are you first class, female, adult, and that rule applies to you in this particular record in the data set. The confidence tells you what percentage of the time does this rule on the left-hand side imply or is associated with the rule on the right-hand side. And you can see here that the confidence is 97%. So this rule basically is golden, because if you are a first class female and you also happen to be an adult, then basically you're associated with survival rate, right? You're 97% of the time, these types of individuals, these types of transactions survived on the Titanic, okay? And then lastly, we have lift. So lift is the increased likelihood of seeing the right-hand side. So for example, the way to look at this is, if you are a first-class female that happens to be an adult, how much more likely than chance are you to have survived? And what you see here is the lift is 2.53 times. So you are 2.5 times more likely to survive than the average passenger on the Titanic if you're a first-class adult female. Okay, awesome stuff, right? There you have it. Behold the wonder that is association rule mining. Wildly, wildly useful stuff. You can use it everywhere. You can use it in HR. You can use it in finance. You can use it in e-commerce. You can use it in supply. You can use it everywhere. Everywhere where you have data and you can model characteristics or behaviors as binary indicators, you can use association rule mining. Okay, so learn it, live it, love it. Until next time, stay healthy and happy data sleuthing.